Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good today, too. Thanks for asking. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. Today in the Voice of Yoga, we'll be talking about the new moon on February 4th, 2019 at 4:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Aquarius. This lunation has a sextile to Jupiter and is conjunct Mercury, making it a conduit to the lower mind and the higher mind. In the process of spiritual development, the contact is found in thought unity which exists between divine mind and the real individual. Listen as Swami explains the benefits of aspects to Mercury and Jupiter. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and connect with the perfection of being. Well, Swami, it sounds like we have a lot to talk about today. So why don't we get started and let's start talking about the new moon that's on February 4th, and let's start talking about the aspects that are related to that.
Yeah, the new moon is the new beginning, so it's a fresh start, and that's today at 4:04 p.m. The thing that I really like about it is that this lunation has a sextile to Jupiter and is conjunct Mercury. And with regard to Mercury and Jupiter, in relation to the chakras, that Jupiter chakra and Mercury chakra, that Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces, and Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. And so when you're looking at human development, and we've been talking about this, that these mutable signs have a lot to do with how we think. When cross-examining the chakras that are associated with the planets, we find that Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, which are the lower mind and the mid-mind. And Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces, which is the higher mind and divine mind. Now the sun rules Leo and the moon rules Cancer. The path of descending prana begins at the feminine terminal of the third eye center, or Ajna chakra, which is represented by the moon, which rules Cancer. Prana descends, touching the feminine terminal of the lower six chakras, then switches back and ascends, touching the masculine terminal of the lower six chakras, exiting at the masculine side of the third eye center, Ajna chakra. Now, when you're looking for representation with regard to understanding ourselves, know thyself, nothing in excess, which is something that we're always working with, trying to know ourselves and know how we are thinking, that we are thinking or can be thinking at these different levels of consciousness, these different levels or degrees of awareness, and to use the zodiac as a template or a schematic. Because a new beginning here is that what we're really trying to do, what we're striving for, is we really want to progress. We want to progress from having material values to spiritual values. And what we're going to find is that, just like we said in the opening, the conduit to the lower mind and the higher mind is it's found in thought unity, which exists between divine mind and the real individual. And that's something that we've began talking about a few days ago, that the real me is spirit. That's what we talked about in the last show, about assuming spiritual identity. So most of us are accepting our material identity, our corporeal body, and our mortal, finite being as who we are. But that's not the truth of our being. And when we accept our mortality, what we basically do is we disconnect ourselves from the truth of our being. And then there's a whole different dynamic that's happening because we're individualized from the world mind. And we're under the law of karma because we have a belief in two powers. And what we're really striving for, what you want to use this new moon for, is this conversion, that you want to go from a finite, material, corporeal being to an infinite, eternal, spiritual being. And in order to do that, we have to acknowledge the presence of spirit. And then we have to assume our identity as spirit. And so working with the chakras and understanding how the chakras work and prana gives us a template.
I want to get back and talk about the phrase and maybe have you explain a little bit more detail, and that's about thought unity. That might be a new concept for a lot of us. Can you explain to us what exactly that is and how do we connect with thought unity?
Thought unity is associated with the biblical term where Jesus says, I and the Father are one. Now, the key question here is, where is Jesus and the Father one? And it is in thought. And so, with regard to when you're trying to internalize this as a personal experience, then you really have to start to see that this concept of thought unity is a dynamic that actually happens when we recognize the presence of spirit, the allness of spirit, that spirit is everywhere, in everything, and it has total awareness. That's the goal of Kriya Yoga, is total consciousness, awareness that I am everywhere now. But when we are trying to do this with the lower mind, the mid mind, and the world mind, we find that we come up short, that we're trying to do something with a function that doesn't have the capacity to handle this concept of total consciousness. So thought is when we're on the precipice of looking at the infinite with a finite mind. And that's where I think this whole thing begins to start to happen. That you really have to understand that human development is revealed when individual mind moves into its rightful position as an avenue of awareness. So our potential is not found in our ability to form thoughts or opinions, but it is our ability to recognize the presence of divine mind. And divine mind is absolute, total consciousness. Now, we can't get our finite, mortal mind around that, but we can point our finite, mortal mind to it. And if we can hold our attention on it, then what starts to happen is this thing called the Christ. that your mind becomes Christed, that the raiment of your mind is now clothed with divine idea. And that's where we start to demonstrate spiritual understanding.
We've talked before in the past about thoughts and ideas. So how do we take that information and apply it to what you just said?
Yeah, see, Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius, that all works with the lower mind, the mid-mind, and the world mind. That mental dynamic or operation is basically all contingent upon the presence of duality that functions in a reality that's apart from unity. And that's what we refer to as thinking, thoughts, forming opinions. Now, when consciousness moves into its rightful position of awareness for the presence of divine mind operates under a completely different mode. And so rather than using the same term as thoughts or thinking, we refer to the function of divine mind as ideas, that it actually thinks in a different format. The difference between them is divine mind thinks in wholeness, in the absolute. And the lower mind, the mid-mind, and the world mind thinks in the rational. And the other thing that we start to understand is that they're under different laws. That duality is under the law of karma. And karma is the perfect accountant. Karma is, for every action, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. Whereas spirit is under divine law, and divine law is absolute goodness, absolute life, absolute peace, love, and happiness.
Swami, earlier in the program, you were talking about the sextile to Jupiter and the conjunction of Mercury. And in the summary, we say that those two would make a conduit to a lower mind and the higher mind. I was wondering if maybe you could give us a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah, the connection there is that when you're looking at the relationship between the planets that are associated with the chakras, the diagram that we use for the logo for our business is what we call a schematic for samadhi. And Mercury in that chart, which is associated with Vishuddha chakra at the throat center, it rules Gemini and Virgo. And Gemini rules the lower mind and Virgo rules the mid-mind. So you're going from needs to being more intelligence, rational thinking, wants. And then Jupiter rules Sagittarius, which is the higher mind. And Jupiter chakra is associated with Svadhisthana chakra, which is at the navel center. And it also rules Pisces. And Pisces is associated with divine mind.
So what are we looking to get out of when we make this conduit?
Well, that's what I think we were talking about. That's the unity, the thought unity, that we're trying to use our mind as an avenue of awareness to acknowledge the presence of divine mind.
All right, great. Well, I think this is a good place to pause to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we will be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and the 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, we were talking a lot lately about I and the Father are one. Let's talk about that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, that's the whole thing of the one mind, and trying to get your head around the concept that there's one mind. We, I think, are socialized with the idea that there are many minds, that every body that appears as an individual has their own mind. But the more you try and understand this from a metaphysical position, the human is divine idea, which means we are a thought in divine mind. That was what we had talked about. Mary Baker Eddy had explained that as man is the reflection of the divine. And then Ames Knoll explained that very well when he said what she meant by reflection is mind considering its own content. That's where you can start to see the unity of consciousness, that if each of us is an idea of this one mind. And the way that I've understood it the best is when C.S. Lewis talked about his inability to ever have a personal relationship with God because he never thought that was possible, in the same way that he never thought that Hamlet would ever know Shakespeare. And so as you meditate on that as just a concept or an idea, that enables you to understand that with the lower mind, the mid mind, and the world mind, I think, so that now you have something that is not completely abstract, otherworldly, and disconnected. And that's one of the reasons why I find Kriya Yoga to be very helpful when you're using things like the chakra system. That it gives you a template so you can hold these concepts together as you're trying to assimilate them and understand them. There's a big difference between the map and the actual trip. There's a big difference between a picture of a location and the actual location. And the same is true with the experience of metaphysics, of this mystical state of being, this oneness, and to recognize this one mind. When you understand the dynamic that's at work, that when divine mind acknowledges itself in your individual being, that is what activates divine mind in your consciousness. And that's where this concept of I and the Father are one. And there's a lot of benefit that comes with that.
All right, so let's talk about benefits, because we all would want to do things that benefit ourselves. So what would be some of the benefits to us?
Well, the main thing is that you now understand the beauty of holiness and you understand the perfection of being. The benefit is that you sacrifice a mortal, finite sense of self, a corporeal identity that is going to expire for eternity. that you trade in your mortality for immortality. You become an eternal spiritual being. That moves you out of any kind of fear that anything could ever happen to you, because you are not limited to a sense of self that is finite. A physical body that is disconnected from its true source of identity is provisional. But if you can make this conversion, and I like the way that Jesus had said that we must be born again of water and the Spirit. And when you are born in the spirit of your identity, then you are no longer finite, you are immortal.
Now, so what is the distinction between the thoughts and ideas? And I'm asking this because we just talked about thought unity. So wouldn't it be idea unity?
Well, yeah. As far as how to explain it, you can explain this in an infinite number of different ways. That's not the important thing. The important thing is to try and create some sort of continuity with language. When you're talking about things that are invisible and tangible, or invisible and intangible, because communication is obscure even when you're talking about things that are visible and tangible. Case in point, if I were to tell a story about being bit by a dog, you would immediately fill in with your sense of perception of what you think the dog that bit me was. And so, for example, you might think I got bit by a German Shepherd. And then as I continue with the story, you find out that I was bit by a French poodle. And that changes it. And the same is true when we're using terms like divine mind, mortal mind, carnal mind, world mind, that these are terms that are not visible and tangible. So we're trying to create a language so that we can communicate our experiences.
So since this show is about the new moon, and you were saying earlier that it's about new beginnings, so how do we use this information to maybe enhance our human experience?
Well, I think for a lot of us, it's a good time to begin. Try and set some sort of goal for yourself. If you are stuck in a rut or in some sort of inertia and you're trying to break out of that, creating some sort of a plan and having the benefit of using a lunation to do it, a way of using energy that's available to you at a given time, that a new moon is a good time to start something. This particular new moon is a really great time for somebody who is looking to graduate from material values, material beliefs, and all of the challenges that come with the law of karma. That when you start to look at a lunation like this as an opportunity to move out from the law of karma, to get out from the 10 Commandment mentality that we've been socialized with, to get out of this concept that the authoritarian figure that is overruling our existence is one that punishes and rewards. And that gets us out of that belief that I am being rewarded for my virtue and then also punished for my vice. And it's a good time to maybe start to see that there's a different way of looking at this. And the better way of doing it is to move out of material values, material law, and into the presence of spiritual law. That divine law plays under different rules.
And if we do that, if we start thinking differently, which I think we termed that as repenting, if we start thinking differently, then eventually what happens is this seeps into our consciousness, and this is one way that we can change our level of consciousness.
And then the other thing is that we start to affect our experience. If you acknowledge the presence of spirit and it is activated in your consciousness, then you live out from the perfection of your being. That your life now cannot consist of sin, sickness, suffering, pain, or even death. That you will start to live from the kingdom of heaven on earth.
So we can't bring any attention to any of those things that you mentioned, sin, sickness, pain, discomfort, whatever. We have to not give it a name. And my understanding is we have to rebuke those things.
Right. And one of the things that you become is what I have always said is senseless optimism. What I mean by that is I used to mean senseless optimism meant that you were foolish or ignorant or even stupid. But senseless optimism here is that you are no longer using the testimony of your senses for validation. That you turn to the presence of spirit, the invisible, intangible source of all life that holds the template for perfect creation. And you believe that if you hold your attention on that will outpicture a reality that will offer you solution to anything that you are struggling with on a visible and tangible or invisible but tangible level. And that's still working with the same formula that we've always been saying is how we think is what we become. But now we're recognizing that I could be thinking with a lower mind, being instinctual, reactive, emotional. I could be thinking with a mid-mind, which is human intelligence, perception, reason, memory, intuition. I could be thinking with a world mind and a sense of collective connectedness. Or I could be thinking with divine mind. And divine mind is the only one of those that works in the medium of the absolute. It is absolute wholeness, absolute goodness. The other modes are dualistic, and they're under the law of karma. And the absolute is under divine law, which is the law of life, perfect creation.
Well, I guess it's about that time we have to start breaking down our show for today. So listeners, be sure to access our websites, www.ipdtransform.com. And once you're there, there's all kinds of tools that you can click on to enhance your learning experiences. Don't forget our Facebook Live episodes we do every Wednesday at 5 p.m. And Swami, if you could just give us just a little blurb about your Wednesday noontime webinars.
Yeah, I think it's a good time if you're interested in talking about this, that it's an open forum and you can either call in or if you have a computer or your phone, you can have video and audio and we can discuss some of these topics that we're talking about here.
Great. And you can access that on the website.
Yeah, you get it on the website. If you go to any of the pages and you click on an online class button, it will take you to our online class page and you scroll down to Pray on Prana, which are the free webinars on Wednesday at noon.
Perfect. Do you have any other final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage everybody to take advantage of this new moon and create a new beginning for yourself in the perfection of your own being. And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.